I think we can get started. Mm-hmm. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are at Guitar Summit in Mannheim in 2025, and today we're going to talk to Bernth about life, the universe, probably his new Ibanez. So thank you so much all for stopping by and for tuning in live on YouTube as well. So Bernth, we've not met before.
We have not. I don't know how that happened, but I watched a lot of your videos.
Well, likewise, so. Right?
Oh, nice.
So tell me, I guess you're known for the YouTube stuff you put out, but also your band is one of the more extreme kind of metal bands that that you might end up listening to. Mm-hmm. So when you were growing up, tell us about the first guitar that you bought and who the bands that were sort of, influencing you then.
That's an instant, easy memory. When I started playing when I was like 13 or 14 years old, everyone was playing BC Rich guitars because of the pointy edges. That was the most metal thing that you could buy back then. And at one point, I just wanted to explore some more styles playing guitar, and it kind of feels off when you have a super pointy guitar. I also had some Flying V's back then, and when I signed up for the conservatory to actually study jazz guitar, you can't show up there with a Flying V or something like that. So I discovered the Super Strat shape for myself, and I've been playing that for over 10 years already, I think, because this is something I can show up to for a pop gig, because I do play for kind of a pop band back in Austria that do like arena and stadium size stuff, which is super cool. But I can also do my, as you mentioned, more extreme kind of metal stuff. So this is kind of a shape in general that you can show up to any gig with, I think.
So your guitar playing journey sounds like, was there a classical element or a jazz element to your conservatoire? And was that, I'm finding it sort of, it's always an interesting journey when you go from learning that style of music, but that ultimately your passion is to play, much, much heavier kind of music.
Oh, yeah.
So what was happening through conservatoire then? Were you passionate about classical and jazz styles of music, or were you just trying to get through it to play the metal stuff?
So you unfortunately kind of have to choose between two different things if you want to study all this stuff. One thing is classical, and the other is jazz, and there's not really much in between. and I'm drawn to classical a little bit more musically, because it's very much about technique. Like I covered some Paganini stuff on my channel, for example, which is great alternate picking exercise stuff. And the only disadvantage is that you would have to play on acoustic guitar, of course, and with fingerstyle if you want to actually study classical guitar. And I'm kind of married to this thing right here and want to play electric guitar, of course. So I decided to go with jazz. And it was pretty interesting because in my first 2 years, I just sounded like your super average jazz player and was getting average grades as well, because I never got too deep into the music as a metal guitar guy. But at one point I kind of discovered that you are allowed to shred a little bit when you play some fusion tunes and all that, and that's where I kind of excelled, like halfway through my studies there, and I ended passing both degrees with honors at the Vienna Music Institute, just because I started being myself a little bit more, just taking influence from the jazz and from the theory, but kind of doing my own thing over the more fusion style tracks. So it definitely helped with opening myself up to more than just death metal and black metal. And
who were your guitar heroes then going through? Because I've never been to a conservatoire, but I know the kinds of insane sort of jazz players that you'll get teaching at those places. So you've got that influence here. Who was the other influence on the other side that was the more metal influence?
Oh yeah. So when I was studying, one guy that I have to mention because he needs much more recognition is Konrad Schrenk, who was a player that was kind of classically trained but also jazz trained and also had a metal background, so he could kind of do everything. That's where I got really inspired of, okay, you don't have to be a metal player, you don't have to be a jazz player, you can actually be influenced by a lot of stuff, and he showed me a lot of things technique-wise as well. But growing up, it was of course Kirk Hammett, because of I think everyone gives the same answer who's into metal, because that's the first band you kind of get into, Metallica, especially the 80s stuff. So I wanted to learn those solos, which are a great entry point for any metal player. And then I got into kind of the technical death metal stuff a little bit around 2007, 2008, with a lot of bands there. And that was the time frame where those Betcha Can't Play This videos on Guitar World went viral, with just where they had guitar players just trying to play their hardest lick. That was kind of inspiring, and it looked pretty cool. But while I was studying, and I mentioned this to you already, I watched your Guthrie Govan interview maybe 6 or 7 times, because he was a big inspiration back then, because he was also, or he is still also, one of those people who you can't really call just jazz fusion player or a rock player, because he does everything flawlessly. So that was kind of cool for me to see, and that's also where I took a lot of inspiration when it comes to the picking technique, because he plays so perfectly on time and articulated and all of that. So that's every guitar player's favorite guitar player, I guess.
I'm sure it's always fun to hear a little bit of playing as we go through the interview. I am interested in, maybe you could just play us a few seconds of something where you feel your conservatoire and sort of jazz understanding has influenced something heavier, so how you might approach a sort of a heavier solo, but with more of that sort of jazzy background. I can hold your microphone if you want to speak at the same time.
So, this is pretty great.
Yeah, I'm also available for hire as a microphone stand anytime.
So one thing that I actually really like to do is work with some of the chords that I got introduced to at the conservatory, because I used to, of course, always play power chords all the time, and the occasional intervallic kind of stuff where you work with fourths and minor sixths and all that. But I really got into chords like this that I use very, very frequently for my stuff. I'm very guilty of overusing that specific chord, so feel free to steal it. If you watched any of my videos, you've seen this shape quite often. So this is something I took with me that helped me quite a lot, to not just work with like your basic chords that only consist out of root, third, fifth, but to also throw something like the ninth or major second in there, which is super simple in this case, because you have, I think most people know this classic kind of minor chord, E minor in that case. As a metal player, you would do this, for example. But what's actually cooler is to, instead of playing the octave, so E, twice, which is kind of boring, play the same note twice, to just move it up a whole tone or just 2 frets to get the ninth or major second. really like. I have a lot of like tapping stuff where you go, where you just add some tapped notes on top, or actually in F, not in E in this case. So that stuff I took with me, where you can see like a chord shape and then an arpeggio on top. Stuff like this, I think, is where it doesn't go too deep into crazy theory, because we also talked about like the alto scale, soloing the whole tone scale and all that. That didn't really stick with my kind of music, what I'm trying to do. But just small details like this, that you can have more than 3 notes in a chord. Could be 4, could be even 5 if you go for chord extensions. I really like that.
It's always interesting, I think, to talk to somebody who's had a more formal music education as opposed to perhaps self-taught, because even just visualizing a chord and then the arpeggio over the top of it, I think is something that a self-taught player wouldn't do. They might see a shape perhaps over the chord that helps. So do you, and that does sound to me like that has helped you make your style of playing more interesting than perhaps a sort of a conventional 80s or 90s kind of rock shredder who might be more just a self-taught blues guy or something.
I think so. What I'm trying to avoid is just doing something that's complex, kind of for the reason of sounding smart or trying to sound smart, because I had that kind of phase where kind of that theory started making sense a little bit more, and I was like, I'm gonna throw in this augmented lick because it's augmented and it means I'm very smart. But then it didn't sound cool. So I'm trying to balance that. But as you said, the one thing that really helped me was visualizing the fretboard a little bit better, because I was kind of stuck in scale shapes quite a lot, and it's really cool. Because the one exercise I can recommend for anyone that wants to get a little bit deeper into that is when we had to study improvisation, which is contradictory, of course, but when we had to practice and study improvisation at the Institute, they kind of forced us to play over simple chord changes, and we were not allowed to play the root note over the specific chords, and maybe also not the 5th, because that's also not the most interesting note. So we kind of had to play over every single chord change, maybe the 7th or 6th or something like that. And once they kind of forced us to play notes that sound interesting, the solo suddenly sounded more interesting, because it wasn't like A minor chord, I'm playing A, F major chord, I'm playing F over that. So just simple stuff like that really helped me personally quite a lot.
Now your career as a guitar player is quite bizarre
It is.
in the extremes of what you can go to with your own metal band through to some of the pop artists that you would play with. How does that even happen? Like, how do you even, I don't know. I think you look super cool, but it's like, I'm not entirely sure that the guy with all the tattoos and the shreddy guitar is the guy that the pop artist would necessarily turn to. Maybe they do, but how does that happen?
For some reason it happens. On one hand, what definitely helps is that I've built like an Instagram and YouTube and all of those kinds of channels. So I get some cool requests. For example, for Netflix recently, I did music for Cobra Kai for that Netflix series.
Amazing.
And for that pop band. I feel like sometimes they think it's kind of cool to have a virtuosic guitar player, not for maybe the studio recordings. You don't have 3-minute guitar solos in there. Whenever I have to record something for their albums, it's a little bit more restrained because it's about the song. But for the live show, it's pretty interesting for a lot of even rap and hip-hop artists to have a live band and to have some solo spots for the players, because it just looks kind of cool when you get like all the lights on you and you do your solo thing and you kind of do something that's a little bit faster, where it's not just about the music but also about seeing like a show on stage, someone that's actually kind of blazing through scales a little bit. So I get to do that for some pop bands because I feel like it kind of benefits the live show. But of course, whenever it's a studio job, it's mostly about the chords, where all of the knowledge that we talked about a little bit earlier comes in more handy than the sweep picking stuff and all that, for sure.
I mean, I think it's fantastic that you can be available to such a variety of genres. I mean, you mentioned Guthrie.
Oh yeah.
I think he's the master of just, you could hire him to do
anything.
Yeah,
I think if you give him like a technical death metal song, although it's maybe not his favorite style of music, he would nail it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, let's talk about guitars.
Yeah. Nice.
You mentioned starting with a BC Rich.
Yeah.
I strongly approve of that. They're
Warlock.
super cool guitars. But it doesn't come any bigger than a brand like Ibanez for if you want to work with a contemporary guitar brand. So tell me about what's gone into your guitar and some of the choices that you were able to make about the features that have ultimately ended up on it.
Thanks for asking. As I mentioned, I don't want all of these interviews to turn into a sales pitch for the new instrument, but we just released it like 2 days ago because we didn't want to just post a video and guitar is out. It's nice to be here to see people trying the guitar and to actually talk about it. So one of the things is kind of a simple design choice that made my life much easier immediately. We decided to move the knobs a little bit back. I think that's what you can see right away. I think it's the only guitar in the AC line, and also I don't know if there's an RG who has that feature, but for me, when I do a lot of my picking stuff, I follow the strings, like for sweep picking. So I don't really angle the pick like this. I like to have the same picking angle for all strings. And I always used to bump into the knobs because they're usually right below the pickups. This is not an issue if you're playing chords or any of that, so it's not a major design flaw that I fixed. It's just something that always stood in the way for me when it comes to my playing. So that's super cool. And the other thing is that we designed some pickups with Fishman just for this guitar. So they're not available on the market right now, maybe in a couple of years, but right now they're just in this guitar. And the reason for that is I always had to switch between different guitars. I think most players know that kind of frustration of I have one guitar that's perfect for metal, but the clean tone maybe not that great with the active pickups, and I have this one guitar with single coils that's great for all the other stuff. So with this one I don't just have the 5-way switch but also the push-pull switch for to get that single coil sound out of the 4th position, for example. Can maybe give a quick demo if you would be so kind. Thank you so much. So I have a distorted tone right here, but in the 4th position, that's usually what I use to.
Do you want to go cleaner? Because I think we can just do that.
Nice.
Hey, see.
Awesome. So I usually had this kind of sound with my other AC, and it sounds nice. But I wanted it like a little more spanky, single coil like. So now when I pull out the switch like this, I get the kind of classic, this kind of tone out of the instrument. Once again, kind of a difference, going from something like this to this right here. So that's super cool for me. And the other thing that, I'm gonna take that again, sorry. The other thing that's really nice is that I can finally play with a neck that lets my fingers do, like each finger stability-wise gets the most amount of control by being supported with the thumb, because I grew up with the myth that you have to play the thinnest neck possible in order to play fast. So I had those super thin necks and I was always kind of tensing up because you don't really have anything to grab onto with your fingers. And I realized when I tried my first AC guitar, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, that a thicker neck actually helps a lot with stability with your fingers. Like not a super thick neck like this, but if you have a bit of a neck to hold onto, it really helps with the support. So this is kind of an oval C shape, which is a great compromise for me between too thick and too thin. And yeah, those are some of my favorite features. I think it's no surprise that the guitar turned out black. That's yeah.
At least you kept the pickups white though.
Yes.
Right?
So my kind of theme is black and white, which is probably not so hard to tell, I guess.
So I mean, I love the AZ range because there's such a versatile range. But let's talk about the rest of the signal path. I mean, we're using these little blue guitar amp ones today, so this is not, I guess this is not your normal rig. But what are you using, and how does that change from when you're in the studio to when you're doing sessions and live stuff?
Yes. So usually I'm going with a Kemper. I have the one that's built into my rack, which I still think is like cutting edge technology until someone told me a couple of months ago that this is already almost 10 years old. But for me, it's still brand new and interesting. And unfortunately, now I can't bring it with me everywhere because right after this I go to China on tour for 2 weeks, then to South Korea and then to Australia. So now I ended up using the Quad Cortex for a lot of stuff, as a lot of players, I think. And at home, I really like working with plugins because I love tracking DI tracks.
Okay.
Because I can decide later on the sound. Because sometimes I record a part and the song is done, and then I'm like, maybe that would sound better with a clean tone, and maybe it's not even a metal riff. So that has always been a bit frustrating for me to re-record when you're going straight out of a Kemper or Quad Cortex like this. So at home it's just a DI track, super simple interface. On stage for the bigger productions I do, it's the Kemper because it has been really reliable, like the massive rack unit, and the Quad Cortex for some flight shows. I heard that some people have some issues with some units here and there because they have a big touch screen and all of that.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's that seems to be the choice of a big percentage of particularly musicians that have to fly a lot from one, and they take they have their Kemper or their QC in their backpack and their guitar in the other hand, and then you can be anywhere, right?
Yes.
So, let's talk a little bit. I mean, thank you very much for taking us through the guitar. I think it's a beautiful guitar, and I'm sure it'll be very popular. Tell us a little bit about the stuff that you started doing with Charles Bertreux as well, because that's been hugely popular, and the idea now of YouTubers who everybody, I think it was for a while, if you're a YouTube guitar player, you weren't a proper guitar player. But now you're taking YouTube musicians on the road for live shows.
And forcing them on stage.
To show that actually some of them can play, as well. So, but how did that come together, and what do you hope you achieve with that kind of that concept?
Thanks for asking. I mean, you had Charles on the channel. I also watched that video. It was pretty cool. Maybe we can do something in the future as well.
Yeah.
With him, I started working today, 3 years ago. We actually have our anniversary. I still have to text him. It was on this exact day that we did our first video together, and we did not immediately talk about going on tour and forming a quote-unquote band or project or anything, but we just work in a very similar way, where we're both extremely reliable, and if he's like, send me a part, I will send it in the next couple of hours, and it's vice versa, and we were both not used to that at all, because musicians can sometimes be, it sometimes takes months to get a response to something. So we just gelled immediately, also musically, and did some one-off shows, and our first European tour earlier this year, and we also had Ola England with us, which was a great package, and was a big test, because you of course have to book like a tour bus that's like $40,000 gone right away, and you're not sure if it's the first time you do this live, if people show up. And since a lot of those venues ended up being sold out, which was really cool, we decided to make this a thing and bring the Escape the Internet tour all over the world if possible. So now I'm going to China with Charles, and South Korea and Australia, and for 2027 there will be another European tour. And we want to kind of, as you mentioned, switch the lineup so that it's not one band that goes on tour, but the Escape the Internet kind of concept where there could be any lineup, and we can reach out to any people really that are interested in doing that. I just talked to Rabia about it real quick. He would be a great fit, for example. And I don't know the whole package for 2027 yet, but Charles is pretty certainly a part of that.
What if you could put your dream like this? So this is people that could be alive or dead, people you've met, whatever. Who would be the dream 2027, 2029, whenever it's going to be? Who would be the dream Escape the Internet kind of lineup for you?
That's a tough one to answer. I mean, one guy was getting Ola for this tour already, because that's who I grew up with, watching, kind of thinking, this kind of looks fun, maybe I should record a video at one point as well. So he has been an inspiration for me. But what I would like to do is, a lot of people know this certain drummer, of course, that you see on Instagram quite a lot, who does the one-handed thing. LS Depario Cipriano. I never know how to pronounce the name of that account. But he would be pretty cool, and people often suggest. And we also reached out to him, but he's very focused on his band at the moment, just pushing that. So he said he would only be interested, I think, if his band was involved somehow, which makes it a little bit difficult logistically if everyone wants to bring more musicians. If you get like a lineup of 5 awesome people and everyone wants to bring the 4 guys in the band as well, it's going to be a bit tough to do that. So he would be great. And I also met Pliny for the first time yesterday, who's not just an amazing musician with great songs, he's
Yeah.
also very, very nice.
Very chilled out
Which
guy.
is cool.
Yeah.
And we already talked to Mike Dawes for the next tour, and I think he's very interested in that. So he's also one of those people who's not just playing very, very well, but he's also putting on a real show. Like he's almost dancing around on stage doing all of this stuff. So I have a long list of people.
What about if it wasn't a YouTuber?
Oh.
If you could have one
Yes.
non-YouTube megastar to be in the lineup.
I would choose someone I met very, very briefly, unfortunately, on Friday, who's also here. It would be Tosin, I think.
Really?
Because he's also very much in the online world, but you don't think of him as like a guy who puts out a video.
Great
every week.
choice. I was
Yes.
thinking, I don't know. Have you got a hero from when you were growing up? That
Oh,
you think
growing
would
up?
be- would it be?
It would be one of those kind of more old school metal people that you would not get on a tour like this.
They just wouldn't do it. You mean?
Yeah, I love Marty Friedman, of course, who's
He'd be
also
great.
touring as a solo artist, and he also worked with Ichika, I think, on some stuff. So I think he even I did a rendition, kind of a math rock rendition of the Tornado of Souls thing, and he actually commented and said it was really cool. So I think he's open for the kind of newer wave of players, but I'm not sure if he would go on a tour package like
He
this.
might do some dates in Japan with you.
Yeah,
You never
that
know.
would be cool. That would be really nice. I have to study that picking technique a little bit more.
Oh, it's
That's
the sort of the
Yes.
upside down hand claw thing.
Something
yeah.
that works perfectly for him, but I have no idea how he does that. So it would be cool to see that up close and to analyze that a little bit more. That would be nice.
All right. Well,
Maybe
look,
one day.
I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks
I
so
think
much.
I'm sure these guys would love to hear a blast of maybe some more playing. So if
Nice.
we could maybe give Bernth a big round of applause, perhaps he'll play out with a minute or two of shredding.
Sure.
I'll hold this for you.
Can
if
you help
want.
me change the...
Yes. Put it back. There we go.
Nice.
Thank you, Bernth. See you guys later. Thanks for watching.